we said, you know what, we'll come down and get grandma. So I actually was the one. I drove down there, packed her up, brought her to live with my mom and my sister. And once she was with us, though, she had that engagement, that stimulation, and, she was kind of holding her own. There's some memory slips here and there, but nothing drastic. But, that was for 2-3 years. And then, you saw the dementia starting to progress, and it got to the point she became nonverbal, wasn't wanting to eat. And we thought, for the best interest of her health would be, let's put her in a facility. And we would continue, and we'd go every day. I would go sometimes 4 or 5 times a week, sit with her for 2 or 3 hours and just hold her hand and, talk to her. And, I'm kind of the fighting spirit, grandma, you can, snap out of this. It's going to be fine. But it really gave me my firsthand real perspective and experience of what dementia can do to a family and what it can do to an individual.
Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Mary Ann Shuko, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne-Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, Owl's author, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, I'm Anne of All's Authors. When I was caring for my mother with dementia, I searched long and hard for memoirs and personal stories about other caregivers' experiences. I wanted to know not just how other people survived, but how they thrived. Unfortunately, at the time, there was not much available. That's why we created the bookstore at allsauthors.com. Now, busy caregivers can easily browse for just the right resource to guide them on their journey. Books are categorized by relationship and type of dementia, as well as genre. You'll find a helpful title in just minutes using our search tool. So, after the podcast, take a few moments to visit our bookstore at allsauthors.com/bookstore. Remember, you are not alone.
In this episode of Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, Mary Ann and I talk with Lance A. Slatton, producer and host of All Home Care Matters, an award-winning podcast that addresses critical issues in caregiving, and the author of the All Home Care Matters Official Family Caregiver's Guide. In our conversation, Lance shares his story of caring for his grandmother who had dementia, and later his father who needed a great deal of care. Both of these experiences shaped his career trajectory and led to his desire to provide support and care to other family caregivers who are faced with multiple challenges and feelings of isolation. A great friend of Owl's Authors, Lance is also the founder and operator of Enriched Life Home Care Services, a notable home care company in southeastern Michigan. I know you'll learn a lot from Lance, as we have. So let's get to the show.
Hi, Lance. Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, Mary Ann. Always good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Lance. I'm glad to see you too. It's such a fun treat to have you on the show.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation, ladies.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so welcome. You've been such an influential part of what we do here and a motivator and an inspiration. So at last we have you on our podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Lance. How did you end up in caregiving world?
Sure. So I'll start with a way back story. I was extremely close to both of my grandparents, and they lived down south. So we really didn't get to see them other than, your Christmas, Easter holidays. And when I became old enough, probably 4 or 5 years old, I would go and spend 4 to 6 weeks with them during the summer. And it was just the best time. I had some uncles that lived down there as well. And, it was just a great experience as a child growing up and, just having that close relationship with my grandparents. And when I was about 18, 19 years old, we started getting some calls from one of my uncles who lived down there by my grandparents. And my grandfather had since passed. And my grandma was starting to call 911 regularly. After the first 2 times, when the third time happened, the police had told my uncle, if your mom does this again, we're going to have to kind of step in and start taking some measures ourselves, because we can't keep responding every time she calls 911. And this wasn't like every day, but it was every couple of weeks. And what was happening is she was kind of experiencing, hindsight, she was having some sundowners, around midnight, 1 o'clock, and she's in this big home by herself. Her mind started playing tricks on her, and she started thinking, it's kind of funny, we tease my uncle. She was insisting that he was having big parties when she would go to bed in the other side of the house. And, my uncle is in his 50s and, married and has a family. And, so we said, you know what, we'll come down and get grandma. So I actually was the one. I drove down there, packed her up, brought her to live with my mom and I and my sister. And once she was with us, though, she had that engagement, that stimulation, and, she was kind of holding her own. There's some memory slips here and there, but nothing drastic. But, that was for 2-3 years. And then, you saw the dementia starting to progress, and it got to the point she became nonverbal, wasn't wanting to eat. And we thought, for the best interest of her health would be, let's put her in a facility. And we would continue, and we'd go every day. I would go sometimes 4 or 5 times a week, sit with her for 2 or 3 hours and just hold her hand and, talk to her. And, I'm kind of the fighting spirit, grandma, you can, snap out of this. It's going to be fine. But it really gave me my firsthand real perspective and experience of what dementia can do to a family and what it can do to an individual. Meanwhile, I'm entering into college, getting ready to pursue a career in healthcare. And so I felt like it really gave me almost like a leg up on other students who are going in with almost like an idealistic expectation of what dementia is, not having had to experience it firsthand. So I felt like that really gave me a really good real world perspective, for when I dealt with patients or, people that we'd be helping.
And you had mentioned that you were planning to go into medical school. What happened with that?
Yeah. So, and I was pursuing that. And later on, my father, and now I'm married, newlywed married. And we get a call one evening that my father needed help. It wasn't dementia related. And I tell everybody, my father was in the Marines back in the 60s, which anybody that knows about the Marine Corps will realize and appreciate the Marine Corps of the 60s is nowhere near what it's like today, right? They had to change a lot of regulations. There's a lot more oversight. And he had taken a severe fall, and the fall caused a severe bruise on his coccyx. And that bruise never truly healed, and it developed into an abscess, and it burst on him one day. Now, we had no idea any of this was going on. He had a major surgery, and he goes back to his house, and this is probably a month or 2 later, a home healthcare nurse called us and said, we have Mr. Slatton here. He's one of our patients. And we're like, wait, what are you talking about? Who, what, And they said, well, yeah, he, had an abscess that burst and had to have some surgery. Well, we're concerned that he's not that he doesn't want to, but it's not that he's able to properly cleanse and bandage and, treat that wound. He needs to probably stay with you guys for a while, or you're going to need to get some outside help for him.
Right.
Well, being my father and, wanting to help him, we just said, well, we'll pack him up and he can come live with us. Now, this was in a separate county, hour away from us. And so it was a different home healthcare system that was going to take care of him once he moved into our house. And he came to live with us, and now we're on top of things. And unfortunately, though, the infection, I should say, rather, had seeped into the bone. So then he developed osteomyelitis, which is infection of the bone. Mm-hmm. And we ended up having a total of 8 surgeries during this time frame, all in that same area. I mean, I don't want to get too detailed here, but we have a coccyx, we have a tailbone. Well, he's going up almost to the sacral area. They had to take so much of the coccyx out, right? And the infection just then developed into the bloodstream, and it was a very unpleasant injury or illness that he was dealing with, or infection rather. But during this time frame, you guys, my wife and I are newlyweds. I am pursuing medical school now. I'm in the deep thralls. My wife's graduated, has her college degree, and started her career. We're 2 young 20-something-year-olds having to provide 24/7 care for my father, which I never begrudged him. It's not his fault, never resented it. But what did cause me great pause was we're having the wound care nurse, social worker, therapist. They're coming to our house, usually home health. You're lucky. They're coming sometimes 5, 6, 7 times a week because of the severity of the wound. Never once, though, did they look at us as the family and said, have you guys looked into this? Have you looked into that? Or here's some information about these services. And that really has left a lasting impact on, how I treat families and interact with those that we're entrusted to care for. I want them to be as equipped as possible. I want to share these resources because, here we are almost 20 years later, and we're still hearing the same stories. The doctor never gave us this information. They never told us this was available. No one ever stopped to say, hey, how are you guys doing? So we appreciate and, can relate to what these family caregivers are going through.
Mm-hmm. That is so amazing that you're doing that that was sort of the birth of your company then, right?
It really was. My love and compassion, I call it love and compassion, empathy, sympathy for others really originated from my experience with my grandma.
Yeah.
But my understanding and my motivation for helping others is from my experience with my father. So it's kind of two-pronged approach. Because of that experience with my father, I remember going to meet a friend of mine who actually was he had his MD, right? And we were going to go to lunch, and I was talking to him, and I left, and I'm going down the hallway of his practice, his building, and there's a help wanted sign outside, and it's for a home healthcare company. So I'm like, oh, okay. I'm working at the university, working in the labs and doing student teaching, and it's minimum wage, right? When you're a college employee, if you will, but they work with your schedule. So there's a trade-off. I'm like, well, I took EMT training. I took paramedic training. Maybe this is something I can do to make a little extra income. I go in there, and the man sitting at the desk where they have this big help wanted sign, I asked him, what are you hiring for? I don't know. Well, what do you need to work here? I don't know. What kind of work do you like? It just struck me as like, okay, this is probably not who you want representing your company if you're hiring and you have somebody inquiring, but regardless. So I left there, and I called my wife on the way home. I said, I have a great idea. Marianne, I don't know about you, but like in nursing school and things, they don't teach you about home care. They might talk about home health care and visiting nurses, but they're not talking about the caregiver and the home health aide, So I thought I had this great idea. So we pursued that. We looked at a lot of the well-known franchises that are out there. But for me, a detail person, I'm wanting to know, okay, what's the difference between franchise A and franchise B? Other than the name, if I say McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, you can say, the Dave's Deluxe, the Big Mac, and the Whopper. But in home care, where's your Dave's Deluxe or your Whopper? What's making you different? And I just came to the realization there's no difference other than the people that are providing the company, providing the work and hiring the people and setting the standards of their employees. So we talked about it, and, we're strong in our faith. We prayed about it and did a lot of research, and we decided, you know what, why don't we just make our own? So that's what we did.
And what year was that?
2013.
Wow.
2013. Yeah.
going on 11 years now. So.
Yeah, 11 years. And I'm proud to say the last 5 of those years, we've been rated the #1 company in Michigan. So we just, I just say, if you have the heart of what you're doing as your motivation, usually it's going to work out for you. We've never lost that desire to really have that personal approach and, help these families in any way we can. And that doesn't even mean hiring us. We've helped countless families get in touch with resources. And, one man was going to spend $5,000 on a hospital bed for his mother because the nursing home wasn't going to let her come home without one. And we said, go talk to her doctor, get an order for a hospital bed, bill it through Medicare. Oh, well, they said we had to buy it. Well, that nursing home also owned the medical equipment company. And so they left that part out, and he had the check in his hand and he tore it up. And, that story out of all of them is always one of my favorites because we really did make a difference and really helped them.
Oh, yeah. That was a big help.
Yeah. And I think it's huge. And wow. So you've gone on. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Marianne. I love your passion about this too, Lance. And what I love is that, man, you've just really risen to the occasion to be more than just a services company now with All Home Care Matters and what you're doing to talk to people about different things and share information. Can you talk a little bit about how all of this then led to some of the amazing things you're doing with your show and your award-winning show, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So in late 2019, early 2020, our company, one of the things I love doing was going throughout all of southeastern Michigan, facilitating caregiver support groups, doing dementia seminars, or even just doing fun games or putting on musical concerts of like oldies and stuff for seniors. And, we all saw like at public places, the numbers started dwindling. We had not been shut down officially yet by our governor, but we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so I just was out at the track one night after my kids went to bed, and I heard a podcast, and the quality sounded like they were all talking in a bathroom, and you hear dogs barking and kids screaming. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I go home and I told my wife, I'm like, we should start a podcast. And I admittedly knew nothing at all about podcasts. And she said the same to me. You know nothing about them. So we researched it. And, we did it in mind, with the thought in mind of this is just going to be for a few weeks, right? Until they get this COVID thing figured out and we get some kind of, policy in place. And then I took some private training with a Hall of Fame broadcaster one-on-one. And in May of 2020, we launched All Home Care Matters. And, it's just, if you'd have asked me then, I would have said, we're just going to try to help some people and do it for a little while. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine, we'd get a YouTube creator award and all these other things, because that was never the motivator. It was like, okay, what can I do with my time now to help people while we're figuring out this whole COVID thing they're talking about? And, those few weeks turned into, we're going on 4 years in May,
Wow.
And which led to obtaining Dementia TLC and getting opportunities to write articles for some, really wonderful websites. And we're having a lot of fun doing it too. And we get to meet great people like Marianne and you and Jean and all the great people at All's Authors. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also fun that's helping people, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And you put out a lot of content too. You consistently publishing new episodes and a variety of topics for across the whole care continuum, not just for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, but across, people caring for children and other health-related conditions. So there really is a lot of information for everyone, really, who's in this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there a when you are thinking about, and of course, Al's Authors, we're always talking about a dementia journey, and as Marianne just mentioned, you have a wide variety of guests. Is there a way that you seek out the kind of people you want to bring to your show to be able to add value to folks out there? Is there a method to your madness, or?
It's controlled chaos is the best way to say it, I guess. we get a lot of, requests and inquiries, and we really kind of look through who the person is or what it is they're wanting to talk about. And, one thing we try to shy away from is becoming like a home shopping club, right? We do have apps on, we do have other services on, but it's only if we find, like, in our opinion, that it's going to be a benefit or a value to a family. We want to have discussions that people may not be talking about, or maybe, represented on a lesser scale than other things. One of our good friends, Roberta Carson, she, wonderful woman. She had a caregiving journey for her son, who was diagnosed with inoperable brain tumor. And from that came Zago Care. It's a nonprofit. All the proceeds go to cancer research. We wanted to help share her story. One, because there's not as many stories out there of parents caring for their child as caregivers, right? And this is a nonprofit where, they're not selling anything. They're doing it's almost like research and fundraising, but by getting her product, you're helping a great cause, but you're also getting a great product to help your caregiving journey. So we look at it through that lens, right? Is it going to help people, or is it just something somebody's wanting to sell? That's not us. We're not going to be your home shopping club, but we are going to help share products, books, that people can really benefit from these stories being shared.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's really great. Thinking about the services that you offer and how you shine a light on different aspects. What are some of the things that how do you refer people, and where do you refer people for things like a dementia journey and the different kinds of things that are out there?
Allsauthors.com.
Oh, well, I mean, to be sure, yeah, but are there? That actually wasn't a tee up. I was really interested in what other kinds of things that you share with people, because we're always trying to share different resources too.
So for us, from the business side, not the podcast side, we refer them always to, like, our local area agency on aging, different nonprofits. If their mom may not need our services, but mom needs to have some engagement, we're lucky that we're in a community where seniors have free transportation from our city, right? And so they'll pick them up, they'll take them to the grocery store, they'll take them to the senior center, even to the mall. So we refer them to those resources that are there for them at no cost, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, from the podcast side, we refer them to, websites that are going to be helpful. Again, I know it wasn't a tee up, but it's true, All's Authors, right? I mean, I tell people at least once or twice a week, probably more, have you checked out All's Authors? Because, again, I'm going to do a sales pitch now for you guys.
Good.
The way your driving force is you're trying to help people. You're not an Amazon. You are a library of endless resources for families for any sort of situation that they may be facing, dealing with dementia, a daughter with a father, taking care of two parents, a spouse, early onset. I mean, it's limitless, what you guys are offering these families. And I'd like to be one of your biggest advocates for that.
Wow.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that more than you know.
Absolutely. It's great. Along that same line, what do you feel like now that you've done all these different things, right? And thinking back to the genesis being the time you spent with your grandmother and then your father, what have you learned, and what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Right. That's always the magic question for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. I wish I knew that there was help and support out there and resources, even for my grandmother, her primary care doctor that we got her here in Michigan when she moved with us, phenomenal. But again, never offering outside of his office room, never saying these are what's available to you outside of, my office. With my father, 2.5 years seeing these nurses and surgeons weekly, never saying, here's some resources, not only for your dad, but for you and your wife, who are taking something on that most people in their early 20s would not ever even imagine being in the position to take on, let alone doing it. So that's what I wish I knew. I wish I knew, to ask more questions and speak up. But I think a lot of us, I didn't have white coat syndrome. I didn't have fear of doctors or healthcare professionals because, for a while, I was working in cardiac critical care while going to college. I didn't have that fear. What I did, though, I had that reverence is a good word. The reverence.
Yes.
You don't question your pastor. You don't question your priest. You don't question your doctor, right? But I think more people should, as all of us should, because, they might be willing to talk to you. They might be willing to share these things. Most likely they would be, or connect you to somebody that would. But it's almost like a tunnel vision when you get in that room for that appointment or that pre-op or that post-op. They're not thinking about anything other than what they're there to deal with. And so go ahead and speak up. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid. They're there to help.
You bring up a really good point, and it makes me think of, we want our physicians and our healthcare professionals to be really expert in their area. And but really what some of us are needing, and what sounds like what you needed, was like that case management piece or some other kind of wraparound service, because, a doctor, a physician might not have time to become completely familiar with all of the things in their health plan that they offer, or the hospital, or the community. And that's what, something like All Home Care Matters can offer to folks, I think, is that insight into, and here are I didn't even know the names of somebody I could have, like the titles, right? Like a geriatric case manager. I didn't know that existed, right? So you bring up such a great point, because yes, ask a lot of questions, and hopefully a physician or a healthcare person or someone in the hospital or someone in the health plan can say, oh yeah, here, this is where we're going to help you out. But yeah, it's such an important piece.
Yeah, I don't want to make a comparison to an oil change, but I can envision something like this in our healthcare system. I took my vehicle in to get an oil change the other day, and I had an 88-point inspection done, right? So they're checking all ins and outs, but I'm just there for an oil change. We should have something like that for our families, where if you're taking a loved one to an appointment, they ask a small survey. Are you feeling depressed? Have you had trouble sleeping? Are you having trouble eating? That's all for the patient, but then there should be one for the family.
Yes.
Do you have concerns? Is there areas you need help with? Would you like some resources? It'd be so simple too, right? Just a one-page survey that you can fill out with your loved one when they're at these appointments, that, the physician or case manager, social worker, geriatrician, whatever it may be, could help maybe then guide you to it.
It's almost as though they assume everyone has this innate knowledge,
right,
about what to do in a situation. And the reality is that people have absolutely no knowledge.
Right.
And now they're thrust into a very demanding and confusing situation, and are busy trying to deal with the immediate and don't have time to try to figure out, what's going on and what do I do next. You really need a team approach.
Yeah. One
person can't manage all of that. So, I think that's kind of part of the failing. I know when I was nursing and doing case management and things, when a person was released from the hospital, we spent time with them going over their instructions, and it was just like, do this, here's your prescriptions, come back, go get an x-ray, come back for blood work next week. If they had a home care referral or something, then that would be made, and we would be removed from the situation, expecting those people were going to take care of that part of it. And it was just very rushed. And sometimes giving information, doing it with the patient who has just been ill enough to be in a hospital and maybe not clear-minded or doesn't understand anything, or may have dementia and not remember anything, and you're not even speaking directly to the appropriate person. You just want to move this person along, because that's kind of the nature of what it was like, is just get people moving. Because we have more people coming in, you can't stay there forever. But that was like a huge glitch, I think, in the system.
It really is, because and that could be an entire episode, right? But I mean, it really is, because I know when my dad was he was in a memory care facility, but for a time had to go to a nursing facility, and when the Medicare says, "Oh, your time's up," they just call her like, "Come get him." Like, there's
Exactly.
no, I mean, and you don't even know when that's going to happen, right? And then it's like, just come get your dad now. And I'm like, well, there's no transition planning in that. What are you talking about? You know?
Right.
So now
just one of the things with the hospital too that's frustrating is they don't have to have a safe home environment to be discharged. Now, when you're in, right, Marianne, when you're in a facility, though, they have to ensure that the person has a safe environment to be discharged to. And, one of the things that, unfortunately, I don't care for, but I think does have some truth to it is, in the hospital, it's almost like treat and street, right? You're treating them and streeting them, and I just feel like we've lost that personalized, more approach to our patients and the healthcare system as a whole.
And I noticed early in my nursing career, they really had that rush to get people out as quickly as possible. So a lot of times people would, depending on their whatever surgery they had, they might stay like one night or 2 nights, and then they needed to leave. And I would visit with them, and they didn't look well at all. Right. And they would be forced to leave, especially like women after having like a mastectomy or giving birth or something. And then many times the doctor would refuse to release that person. He would want them to have one more day. And then when I would come in the next day and see that person, it was like they were a different person, because they had recovered from their anesthesia. They were starting to be on the road to wellness again. You could see they were more alert. They were, cleaned and groomed. They just looked 100% better. And I said, that extra day makes a huge difference.
Big difference. Yeah, I mean, we get phone calls all the time from our local hospitals, from families or the patient, and they'll say, I'm being discharged at 1 p.m. today. They said, I need to have help. My daughter lives in another state, and it's like, we can't help you in 45 minutes. I mean, we got, just like you can't call your surgeon and get surgery today. We have to do an intake. We have to do an evaluation. There's a process. But these hospitals, it's just like, they're not looking at that. So like these patients they live alone, or they have an elderly spouse is not capable to, tend to their needs, and no family locally. And that should have been caught before you're there signing the discharge papers.
Right. At my hospital, we had nurses from the home care agencies that actually were stationed at the hospital. And they would get the referrals and meet the patients before they were discharged.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that worked really well. So they got to know them, and they started the process and the paperwork and the evaluation while they were in-house, so that when they left, the next day somebody would show up. But, people are expecting that there's going to be somebody there immediately, and they're going to stay with them 24/7 and do like everything that needs to be done. And that doesn't even exist in home care unless you're personally paying somebody to be there 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions about
what home
care can and cannot do.
Right. And Medicare pays for it, but it doesn't. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. And there's a lot of it is private. It has to be private pay, or if you're on Medicaid, then you can
long-term care insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
BA has a wonderful benefit, aid and attendance for wartime veterans and or their spouses, and auto for personal injury. But outside of that, health insurance and Medicare isn't covering these services. And I think these services, when implemented appropriately, can help reduce, readmission rates too.
Absolutely.
So I also wanted to ask a little bit more about, in terms of, say, dementia, what were some of the things that were most frightening to you, and that you would want people who, and how did you face that? And then, and it could even be about, your own journey with your grandmother, or what you've heard from people. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily related to dementia, but like, what are those things, those frightening things that people maybe want to pay attention to? And how do you talked about your grandmother possibly having sundowners. I think that's a shock to a lot of people, right? There's things that come up.
I think first and foremost, above all is for family caregivers knowing they are not alone. It's just getting connected and finding the other people or situations that they may be going through, or even, like the support groups. It could be virtually, it could be in person. I think having people around you that can understand, at least relate to somewhat what you're going through and experiencing is so crucial. Because like I said, for my wife and I, we did feel like, other than like my family, we felt like we were on an island, right? I mean, it was all on us. My mother was a great help. Even though my parents were divorced, she was helping to help me. We felt alone, and, nobody should have that feeling. Frightening was feeling alone, right? I mean, you're like, oh my gosh, I mean, you almost feel like you're a black sheep of society because, we didn't know anybody else was going through things like this. We didn't know there was resources out there. I mean, I blame to an extent, the healthcare professionals that we were interacting with, but only so much, right? I mean, they're kind of staying in their own lane, but who's to say they should have to stay in their own lane? You're just giving resources to people. I want people to seek out others that are going through what they're going through and educate themselves. One of the biggest misconceptions is, if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen one person. And that's so, as you guys know very well, that's so not true. And I tell families all the time, Christy, just because you heard of your, friend's mother who had it and she was fine and, she would just get really happy and sing, obnoxiously, that doesn't mean your dad's going to have the same experience. He might become nonverbal. He might shut down, So if you've seen one person with dementia, you've only seen that one person. That's what makes it so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Everything, there are so many different variables and all these situations, whether or not they have a spouse, if they have family support, how much, assets do they have to cover care? That's huge. Some people have long-term care insurance and it's great. Other people, they have nothing. They
have nothing.
Qualify for Medicaid. Somebody has to put that in process.
Right.
Where you live is huge. What services are available?
Very important.
That is a major factor. I know, I live in New York. We have a wealth of resources here. It's very generous. The state, social services, all of that. People would move away. They didn't like to pay the taxes, so they'd like to move down south. When tragedy struck and they needed care, where do you think they went? Came back.
Right.
Because they couldn't get the services that are available in this state. And it's like that in other states too. So that's something that people really have to be aware of, is what's available in my community. And don't wait until you need it. But every community has tons and tons of resources, and they also have a lot of times like a senior health fair or something like that, which is great to go to just so that you can see, because you just know.
And also the difference between rural and urban areas, like as close as you are to an urban center, you're going to find more resources. But some of the, more remote areas, it's always going to be an aspect of living remotely that you're not going to have as much contact with what some of the services are. And so then that sort of speaks to, as you're aging and you want to age, if you want to age in place, are there services there for you? And is that important to you? I mean, maybe some people are like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But, at some point it might. So thinking about that.
Absolutely.
Lance, I also wanted to ask, so you and your wife started this company and we're helping folks and doing healthcare services and helping them. And then you take on this podcast. What have you learned since doing the podcast that may have informed your business? Has that happened?
I don't know that there was anything that informed the business per se, other than just discovering a whole world of resources that, just being a localized company, we weren't really looking outside of our state for much of anything. I had shared when Marianne and I first met and spoke, I said, I've always been a big supporter of All's Authors, going back to, years ago before the podcast was even on the radar, just because I appreciated how much you guys are doing to try to help families get in touch with resources. That's my biggest thing, and that's informed the business in a sense, where now we're able to, resources other than us authors that we may not have been aware of, letting them know, like, there's this out there, there's that out there, and we have one of the custom creative collections, and we've given out almost all of the books from that collection, and just even one lady at our church, I gave her Jean's book, and I mean, she's passed it on to 2 other people that she knows of who has been, dealing with parents with dementia, so just that makes me feel good because I feel like I've helped, but without, the podcast necessarily, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. So I also want to give you an opportunity to do some bragging, and I see some really cool awards back there. So can you tell us a little bit about some of these shiny objects back there? It looks like you have an Emmy. It's awesome.
Thank you for embarrassing me, Christy. I don't like talking about myself, but so the one award is YouTube Silver Creator Award. One of my favorite episodes of all time is the video we made with our kids and their friends when we were unboxing the award. It's so much fun. We got blue hydrangeas in there for Marianne. I just recommend people watch it. It's just fun. It's a fun spoof on care and, things like that. And plus I'm proud because 2 of my 3 kids were actually a part of the video. My 3rd had gotten strep throat. So we put a video clip in at the very end of the video of her. So we got that, and our video editor, who's in his early mid-20s, started getting really, really excited and just like almost obnoxiously so, but in a good way. When we got like 94,000 subscribers, and he's like, do you know what's coming? Do you know? And I had no idea. He said, once you cross over 100,000, YouTube is going to audit your channel. You're going to get to fill out all these forms. And it's like a big, big to do. And we got an official YouTube check mark now next to the channel name. And so that was a really cool experience. And then the other one that you said looks like an Emmy, that's from the Academy of Interactive Visual Arts. It's an actual academy. I think they're loosely associated with like the actual academy. It's all for like arts and video and production. And we got that for a social series on healthcare. And the video we actually were chosen for was the one Marianne was a part of, and that's the ethics of dementia and social media. Something that is like my little, flag, and I'm going to fight and die on that hill about. And the other one is the W3 award. That was again for winning for a best series in healthcare and awareness.
That's fantastic. Those are great. And I didn't, of course, mean to embarrass you, but I'm glad you shared those with us, because that's really, so meaningful, right? To have that kind of recognition too, right? It's nice to know that there are industry folks who are sort of championing people who are doing the kind of work you're doing. So I love that.
I'll put the links to those videos in the show notes.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Lance, as we're kind of winding up a little bit, I wanted to ask what is new, what's coming up for you? What else are you guys going to be jumping into?
Yeah. So, earlier in 2023, we partnered with Lori LeBay, and we now have a show we produce once a month with her called Conscious Caregiving with L&L, which has just done phenomenally well. And as a result, we've launched the Caregivers Journal podcast, which is a show with Denise Brown, a wonderful, wonderful lady who is just a wealth of information and experiences in the caregiving space. And that shows we're going to be releasing the first episode later this week. And so we have those 2 shows we're doing, and something that I'm personally excited about. I've been working on a book, and the book will hopefully, I'm going to say next week, just to be safe, because you know how those things can go. But that book is going to be called The All Home Care Matters Official Family Caregivers Guide. And I wanted to put something out there that is talking to family caregivers, and it's half book, half guide, where, it's kind of going through the whole caregiving journey from the start to the later end stages, with a lot of great resources and information in there. So we're really excited to share that with people, and hopefully it will offer some valuable help to families.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, you just have your own experience, your own lived experience, and then what you have been, I'm sure, just learning, and how really you're on the cutting edge of doing some things for folks in the caregiving industry, the caregiving economy. And I think you bring so much to that, and that'll be really, really well serving of people, because family caregivers, you're right. I mean, the healthcare industry, people hand them off to us, but they don't say, how are you doing? How can we support you? When it's like your entire ecosystem in your world has been shifted, and that's not getting the same kind of support. So what a great resource. That'll be really terrific.
Thank you.
Well, Lance, thank you so much. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk with you, and we look forward to continuing working with you. It's so great.
Always a pleasure, Christy. Thank you guys for the invitation.
You betcha. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an All's Authors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on All's Authors, please visit allsauthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore, where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to allsauthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony.
Hi, I'm Jean Lee from All's Authors. All the resources we offer at allsauthors.com, including this podcast, are brought to you free of charge, and our authors incur no expense for inclusion. Our management team is a dedicated group of passionate volunteers who earn no financial compensation. But to continue our mission to provide valuable resources to dementia caregivers, we need the support of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, please make a donation at allsauthors.com/donate. We are a 501c3 organization. Remember, you are not alone.